Nobody in the city noticed the girl sleeping on the same park bench every night, except one man who almost walked past her like everyone else. What he discovered a few days later would change two lives forever, and it all started with a simple question no one had ever bothered to ask. The park sat between rows of glass buildings and busy streets, a place where office workers hurried through during the day but avoided at night. When darkness fell, the lights from the skyscrapers reflected on the empty paths, and the cold air settled in. That was when the girl arrived. She couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. She carried a worn backpack and a folded blanket, and every night she carefully chose the same bench under a large tree. Most people assumed she was just another runaway or a troubled kid. Some looked at her with pity, others with suspicion, but no one stopped. She kept to herself, never begging, never asking for help, just sitting quietly and watching the world pass by. Sometimes she read an old paperback book under the streetlight. Other nights she simply stared at the sky, as if searching for something far away. One evening, a black luxury car slowed near the park entrance. Inside was Daniel Harper, a millionaire who owned several real estate companies in the city. He was used to solving big problems, negotiating million-dollar deals, and being surrounded by people who agreed with everything he said. But that night, as his car passed the park, he noticed the girl curled up on the bench. At first, he looked away. It wasn't his concern. The city was full of problems, and he couldn't fix them all. But as the car moved forward, something about the stillness of that small figure stayed in his mind. He told his driver to stop. Daniel stepped out, the cool night air hitting his face. He walked slowly toward the bench, unsure what he was even going to say. The girl looked up, alert but calm, as if she had learned long ago to read people quickly. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, sir." Her voice was polite, steady, and far older than her years. Daniel hesitated, then asked, "Do you have somewhere to go?" The girl shook her head, but she didn't look embarrassed. She simply answered with quiet honesty, "This is where I sleep." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen poverty before, but standing here, hearing it spoken so simply, felt different. He offered to call a shelter, but she gently refused. "I can't leave this area," she said softly. He didn't understand what she meant, but before he could ask more, she thanked him for checking on her and returned to her book. Daniel walked back to his car, unsettled in a way he couldn't explain. For the first time in years, the comfort of his wealth didn't feel comforting at all. The next night, Daniel found himself thinking about her again. And without fully understanding why, he returned to the park. When he arrived, she was there, sitting on the bench, carefully repairing the strap of her backpack with a needle and thread. He sat down at the other end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. "I realized I never asked your name," he said. "Amara," she replied. Over the next few minutes, their conversation slowly unfolded. Amara spoke clearly, thoughtfully, and with a quiet intelligence that surprised him. She talked about school subjects she loved, especially science and history, and she spoke about books as if they were close friends. Daniel began to realize this wasn't just a homeless child. This was a bright, determined young person carrying a burden far heavier than most adults ever faced. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had been on his mind since the night before. "Why do you stay here?" For a moment, Amara didn't answer. She looked toward the far end of the park, where a small, dimly lit building stood beyond the trees. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "My little brother is in the hospital across the street," she said. "They only allow one visitor, and my aunt works nights. I stay close so I can see him every morning before school, and every evening before visiting hours end." Daniel felt the words hit him like a wave. Suddenly, the bench, the blanket, the quiet patience, it all made sense, and for the first time in many years, Daniel Harper didn't know what to say. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The image of Amara sitting alone under the streetlight stayed in his mind, and so did the quiet strength in her voice when she talked about her brother. The next morning, instead of going straight to his office, he drove to the hospital she had mentioned. Inside, he spoke with a nurse and carefully asked about the boy. What he learned left him silent. Amara's brother, Malik, had a serious heart condition. Their parents had passed away 2 years earlier, and their aunt was struggling to keep a roof over their heads while paying medical bills. When Malik's condition worsened, the aunt had taken a second job, leaving Amara to manage school, hospital visits, and everything else alone. Daniel stood in the hospital corridor, feeling something he rarely felt: helplessness. He was a man who could move millions of dollars with a phone call, yet he had walked past a child carrying a world of responsibility on her shoulders. That evening, he returned to the park again. Amara looked surprised to see him, but she greeted him politely. Daniel sat down and said gently, "I visited the hospital today." For a moment, Amara's eyes widened, and Daniel quickly added, "I just wanted to understand." There was a long silence before she spoke. "Most people don't," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Amara looked down at her hands. "I'm not alone. I have my brother." Her answer struck him deeply. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't asking for anything at all. She was simply enduring, one day at a time, with a strength that humbled him. Over the next few days, Daniel began helping in small ways. He arranged for meals to be delivered to the hospital in the aunt's name, making sure no one felt uncomfortable or indebted. He spoke with doctors, quietly covering costs that had once seemed impossible to manage. But he did it carefully, making sure Amara and her family kept their dignity. One evening, he brought Amara a new blanket. She hesitated before accepting it, then said something that stayed with him forever. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, "not helping me, not giving me things." Seeing me, Daniel realized then that what had broken his heart wasn't just her situation. It was how invisible she had been to the world, and for the first time in his life, Daniel began to understand that real wealth wasn't measured in money, but in the difference you made when you chose to care. A few weeks later, the park bench was empty. The blanket was gone, and the backpack was nowhere to be seen. Daniel felt a sudden wave of worry as he hurried toward the hospital. When he reached Malik's room, he stopped in the doorway. Amara was sitting beside her brother, smiling in a way he had never seen before. Their aunt stood nearby, speaking with a doctor. Malik's surgery had been successful. The long nights, the fear, the uncertainty, they were finally beginning to lift. Amara noticed Daniel and stood up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly, "We're moving into an apartment next week. My aunt found a better job, and someone helped with the deposit." Daniel smiled, but before he could respond, Amara stepped forward and hugged him. It was a simple, genuine hug, the kind that carried more meaning than any words ever could. Later, as Daniel walked out of the hospital, he felt tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of realization. All his life, he had chased bigger deals, bigger buildings, bigger numbers, but nothing had ever felt as meaningful as helping one small family find hope again. From that day on, Daniel made it a point to walk through that park every evening. Not because Amara was still there, but because he never wanted to forget the lesson he had learned on that quiet bench under the tree. Sometimes, the people the world overlooks are the ones who teach us the most. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change a life, including your own.